Welcome back to our 8th episode on love, growth, and narratives. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Freddy.
And I want to start off by, first of all, checking in with everyone. I hope everyone's had a great week. Lots of information out there in the social media world coming at us all the time. I hope that you're able to navigate it and navigate just life, because life be lifing. So welcome back. I'm glad you're joining us once again. We appreciate you. We have over 300 listens on Apple Podcasts, which is great. And then we have even more on Spotify and Audible, and a few on, what is it called?
Our YouTube channel.
Right? So we appreciate that. We want to keep those numbers going. Don't forget to subscribe and hit like and follow and all that good stuff. We really need you to do that. And to please keep sharing our page. We appreciate it. We sat down today for a little bit and we talked about what is our goal. And our goal was just to hopefully impact community and share ideas and get people talking and opening up. That's our number one goal. And so we would like to get these podcasts out to as many people as possible. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, only thing I really wanted to add was on the YouTube channel, it's audio only. It's basically a picture of us with audio. However, we are in the midst of trying to move towards video. And so once we're able to do that, we will have a video recording on YouTube, as well as Spotify also allows you to do video. So That's what we'll be working on soon.
I'm excited about that going forward. You want to introduce what we're going to talk about today?
Yes. So because today we would be talking about love, I felt like it was important for us to talk about self-love, or sometimes the lack thereof, and how that has affected us throughout our lives.
Mm-hmm. Let's define, for the purpose of this conversation, let's define what self-love is and any adjectives or opposing things that go with that.
Now, I'm going to be honest. We researched this, and I'm not sure that I have a concrete definition as well as dividing lines between them. But in terms of self-esteem, it seems to be based on your achievements or your ability to achieve, that you have the confidence that you can do things. Whereas with self-love really seems to be more of a pure love that is unconditional, where even when you screw up, you kind of give yourself grace.
Yes.
And so that seemed to be the difference. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. I think how your self-esteem can come and go depending on what it is. You can have high self-esteem about certain things that you do and maybe lower about others. But with self-love, you love yourself anyway,
right?
Regardless of that, and how you treat yourself, regardless of what you can accomplish or not accomplish. So I feel like that's the major difference between the two.
Yeah, and as a child, I was really lacking in both self-esteem and self-love. And my parents used to always tell me that, the more you achieve, that'll bring up another word that we hadn't talked about, which is confidence. Just the knowing your ability to do certain things. Mm-hmm. And I felt like as a child that I couldn't do much. And I didn't have self-love. So there were things that I was good at, but in terms of having that self-love for the things that I wasn't good at, it really affected me. What about you?
I did not have high self-esteem or very much self-love as a child. I think maybe my very younger years, like 3 years old, my mom would say, I didn't want to hold her hand. I thought I was so cute walking down the street, strutting my dresses and my hair and whatever. But I think once I started getting school age, I would constantly compare myself to other people. I remember going all the way back to kindergarten, comparing myself. The way that I learned to read at the age of 3 is because there was a little girl who lived in our building, who was a friend of mine, Natasha, and she knew how to read and I didn't. So I wanted to learn how to read, and which was great and it helped me. But everything was always based off of what other people were doing or not doing, or what other people were saying to me. I got teased a lot about the way that I spoke. So that made me become very quiet. I was afraid to speak around certain people because I was going to be told that I speak like this race or that race or proper or whatever, all the terms that were used at the time. And so I would be quiet. And then also the shade of my skin being darker, I would get teased about that and talked about that. I just would hide myself, and I wasn't confident about anything that I did, really. I had confidence when it was just me. I'm like, oh, I like this. I could be proud of myself for the way I wrote something for school, but I was afraid of what everybody else would say about it.
Yeah.
And so maybe I missed opportunities to showcase what I knew, or just doing certain things like kids do, go to camp and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't do it. I refused it. On top of it being an introvert, but I think a lot of it came from just being afraid to be vulnerable around other people. I came across this idea that I need to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Even in school, I would, this kids that I went to school initially in Koreatown. Everybody was like just so advanced. I mean, they had tutors and everything at home, and I did.
Koreatown, Los Angeles.
Koreatown, Los Angeles, yes. And I would like, okay, let me write like them. Let me print like them. Let me try to do everything like them. And also I had low self-esteem, or which turned into a lack of self-love about my weight. Even though as a kid I kind of fluctuated, but I wasn't always heavy as a kid, but I seemed heavy next to the people that I hung around with who were very petite. They were shorter than me. They were smaller than me. So I lacked confidence in how I looked, my height, my weight, which impacted how I walked. You start to shrink yourself. It just really, I did a number on myself. My mom tried to help me with that, but I don't know, it was very strong for me, where I just didn't have that self-esteem, which turned into, which I knew nothing about, really self-love back then. Because nowadays you see parents on social media having their kids repeat these affirmations, and I am this and I am that and I love myself and all. That was probably going on somewhere during that time, but it wasn't a popular thing to do. And so I didn't, my self-talk was negative.
Yeah.
I was the only child, so by myself a lot. And then I was shy and introverted. Not that those two always go together, but I was both. And so I didn't really get a chance to be around a lot of different kinds of people to see them like showcase self-love or self-esteem. You need your peers. You need to see that from your peers. Your parents can say it to you as much as possible. Once you get out there with your peers, that's testing everything, know? And I really was not prepared for that. I just wanted to shrink myself all the time. And then it became, I have to be the model Black girl, because I really did not grow up around Black people when I was younger, and I felt like I was the representative of Black people. So I was really trying my best to show that I could be really good and perfect and not make mistakes and not too loud and whatever all of the different things are, which just meant I wasn't being myself.
Yeah,
I wasn't allowing myself to be myself, which was awkward Black girl. I didn't want to come off like that because then I was going to catch hell for it. Yeah. So I suppressed myself, or I showed up in a way that I thought other people accepted me. So that impacted, so my self-talk, my self-love wasn't there, or I think it was wrapped in looks. It was like, well, I'm going to wear this makeup and I'm going to wear my hair like this and I'm going to straighten it and I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get skinny and I'm going to wear these jeans. It was all about how I looked and not really anything about me as a person. Yeah. And I don't think I even got to that until I was an adult, really. Wow. So, I don't know, what else did you deal with in your childhood?
Well, I was thinking about it also, and this goes back into childhood, starting off in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Ben Hill area of Southwest, which was an all-Black neighborhood. And there I had my friends, one next door and one across the street. But I never felt like I kind of fit in, even though I did. I never felt like it. I was a short kid with an afro and glasses. I felt just awkward. And then in elementary school, my parents moved us from this all-black neighborhood in Southwest Atlanta to an entirely white neighborhood in Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey. And luckily we were only there for a few months, but we rented this home right across the street from the boardwalk. And it was weird because people would actually come to our bay window at night to see what Black folks looked like. And so that didn't work out too well. But then we settled into our home that was a little bit more permanent in Toms River, New Jersey. And in Toms River, New Jersey was still, an all-white neighborhood, majority Italian neighborhood. And I was such an outcast, and I got beat up a lot. And, it was just, I didn't have a lot of friends. Interestingly, as I look back, I did actually have some friends. There were some kids in the neighborhood that put a stop to me getting jumped on the playground. It was interesting. There were kids that said, no, you're not going to do this anymore. And they looked out for me, but I never fit in because I'm this kid with an afro and glasses with this Southern accent being in New Jersey, and so that really affected me. From there, we moved later on to Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, which is a southern suburb of Pittsburgh. And it was, again, an all-white neighborhood. And those kids were actually worse than the kids in New Jersey. At least in New Jersey, there were some kids that were friends of mine that helped me out, that would protect me and things of that nature. But when we moved to Mount Lebanon, now we're in a situation where I have zero friends. I mean, just absolutely zero. And when I think about that, I also think about my older sister, because she was there. She's 2 years older than me, and she was there during this whole experience. And it seemed like she flourished regardless of the area that we lived in. She has this personality that people just want to be around. And I didn't. And she was this outgoing, friendly person, and I wasn't. I was a kid with low self-esteem. And we moved from Mount Lebanon down to Maryland. Now, understand, during this whole thing, a few times a year, we would go back and forth to Atlanta because that's where we felt like was home base. We still had our house down there. My parents are born and raised in Atlanta. And so we were constantly going down there. That's where our family was. And when we would go down there, then you would notice that stark contrast in my accent, the music I listened to, the clothes I wore, the whole 9 yards. And so there again, I'm there around Black folks, but I don't fit in. So then going forward again, we leave Mount Lebanon and we move down to Maryland into a heavily diverse area called Columbia. Beautiful neighborhood, great people. But I, there again, had a problem because my accent was different coming from New Jersey and Pittsburgh down to Maryland. The music that I listened to, even though back then I was listening to what were the beginnings of hip hop and R&B and everything, I also enjoyed heavy metal. In Pittsburgh was where I was introduced to AC/DC and Def Leppard and all the rest of that. And I really enjoyed that. And Billy Joel, which is, of course, way outside of heavy metal. But I was just different and I never fit in. I started to feel like maybe my self-worth and my self-confidence and everything was the fact that I hadn't really achieved much. I was a smart kid. I did well on tests, but I didn't do homework. I didn't do projects, all that kind of stuff. But I picked up on concepts quickly. So I did believe that I could always pick up on the new concepts. I just hated doing homework and I hated doing projects and all of those different types of things. But going through high school, I did very poorly. I left high school I say my fourth year, you can call it my senior, my fourth year, because I wasn't going to graduate. My grades were just horrible because not only was I kind of an outsider, but I started to hang out with outsiders. And so it was like, it was a few of us fellas that felt like we were outside of the in group, and we just kind of hung out and we stayed away from school because that was just a reminder of how much you're not in the in group. And so I left school during my fourth year, and my mother, after being so disappointed with me, understandably, and being upset and everything, she talked to my principal. And because the principal knew that I understood everything that I had learned, I just didn't do homework and stuff like that. And so they worked out a situation where if I went to 2 sessions of summer school and got, I believe, at least a C in each one, that they would give me a diploma, which really came in handy because while I was going through that process, I was working, and I came home one day from school and then work, and my parents said, "Hey, come on into the living room." And there was an Army recruiter there. I hadn't even thought about the military. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew college was not going to be in the cards for me because even though I had a fairly high SAT score, I didn't do any work. And I knew that college would have been just a huge waste. And so my parents convinced me that this was the way to go. So I actually enlisted at 17, had to get parental consent. For people who were in the Army, if you've ever heard of a DEPER, a delayed entry program, I was a DEPER. When I went into the Army, I said, here's my chance to really make something of myself, to change who I am and gain some self-esteem. Because of course, when you go to the military, just like when you go to college somewhere, you get to start over because people don't know you, and you get to kind of set your reputation for what you want it to be. I took because my not my SAT, but my ASVAB, which is, for most people who don't know, it's the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. It's basically the SAT for the military. And I scored within the top 1% of the military. And so I qualified for everything. And so I decided I wanted to do intelligence. I wanted to be an intelligence analyst. And they tried to talk me out of it. Oh, this school is really difficult. You know, it's got this huge washout rate or fail out rate. And so you may want to try something else. I said, no, this is what I want. I went through basic training feeling like, here's my chance. If I can make it through basic, then this is going to elevate my self-esteem. Graduating from basic training did elevate my self-esteem, but it didn't elevate my self-love. And so I felt like, okay, here's something that I can do. I still didn't really love myself anymore. And I didn't realize that there was a difference. I thought that as you get all these achievements, it's going to translate into self-love, which it did not. You know, and I made it through and graduated the intelligence school, the Signals Intelligence Analyst course down at Goodfellow Air Force Base in Texas. I felt a rush of self-esteem because here I am making it through this extremely difficult course that so many people washed out of, but I still didn't have self-love, and I didn't realize it. I just thought that it was this automatic thing that when you achieve things, it's going to turn into self-love. And it really didn't. So I've gone into my childhood. So Tiffany, how did you navigate that?
I just pushed through. I don't think I even attacked the self-esteem, self-love thing until I was much older. I just went through life with kind of low self-esteem and probably no self-love into my adulthood. I think it impacted everything really. I mean, there was other variables, you know, things that were going on at home that made me just stick close to home and not really venture out as most people did when they reached their 20s or they started going to college or whatever. I just worked like 4 part-time jobs and went to school full-time, and I didn't hang out with anybody. I didn't do anything. I came straight home. That was the first time I put on a ton of weight, which I didn't see it coming on. Which, you know, you always hear people attribute weight to self-love, and the assumption is that a person who's overweight doesn't love themselves. I would say in my case that could be true, but I'm not going to say it was just related to the weight. You know, there's people who are overweight who absolutely love themselves.
Absolutely.
And another thing is you may not love yourself in every area of your life, right? Because if I think about it for weight, for example, let me go back a little bit. Once I got a little bit older, I put a lot of emphasis into working out and losing weight. And I had this huge weight loss, 128 pounds, you know, naturally all of this other stuff and all this like kind of semi-fame, you know, Facebook and Instagram fame came with it. But I still did not love myself. I felt more confident in my clothes. I felt more confident in how I moved. I was stronger. I had muscles and I was getting attention that I wasn't getting before, or more positive attention anyway. But I still was like choosing the wrong people to be with, which I think has to do with self-love for sure, because you wouldn't allow someone to treat you poorly because, you know, you're not going to allow that if you love yourself. You're going to just protect yourself like you would someone outside of you that you love. I think that I had a lot of missed opportunities in relationships because I became a person who chased love. And I thought that was a way, if I got someone to love me, then that would raise my self-esteem. And then that would translate to self-love, not realizing, like you said, they're different. You can achieve all of these things and still not have self-love. Look at I lost the weight. I went to college. I got a master's degree. I bought a condo. I've never rented in my life. You know, all of these things that are supposed to be like, ooh, great, you know, the American dream. But I still wasn't loving myself, even in the weight loss. I was like, this is not the body shape that I want, and I'm not small. I felt when I was around, you know, non-Black people, I felt like I was not small enough, and then when I was around Black people, I felt too small. Like I probably did some of that to myself. I mean, yes, society does that too, because one culture might like thicker, although now bigger, thicker butts, everybody wants one. But at that time when I was a little younger, it wasn't really like that. It's like, get as small as you can. You got to be small. Anything you're not a size 4 or 6, you're fat, you know? And then that's what we're shown on TV as well. And I felt that way. But then when I actually got to, I think the smallest thing, I was like a 6 or 8. Then I was like, oh my God, I'm too skinny. I don't have any curves. Like, that hit me too. That was the self-talk that I was doing, just constantly looking at myself and seeing what I was lacking, even while I was getting better. And then move forward to tons of heartache and reading some self-love books, which was more about, like, at the time it was talking more about, you know, going and get a massage, get your nails done. It was more kind of focused on your looks, your body, not on your mind, your heart, your inner talk. But that's what it was, right? So I was like in the self-help section in the bookstores. And I was reading those kind of books. And so I try to do things, let me go out here and experience this and that. But still, it was the inner talk. And I actually remember a friend of mine, who we've like kind of fallen out, but we talk here and there. One day I was apparently talking out loud negatively about myself, and she was just absolutely disgusted with it. She's like, how could you talk to yourself that way? She's like, I never ever look in the mirror and tell myself like I'm ugly or I don't have this or I'm lacking that. She's like, I never ever speak to myself that way. How could you speak to, I mean, she went in on me. She's notorious for going in on me, but she really went in on me about that. And it stuck with me like, that's so true. Like, why am I would never, right? And I'm such a humanitarian. I care about everybody, all the cultures, everyone. I feel sorry for people. And I'm like, but why didn't I feel any of that for myself? And I'm still exploring why I don't feel I don't treat myself the same way that I treat other people. I'm working on it, especially in this relationship. It's like pushing me to do so. It's giving me the space to do so. But that stuck with me. And then I tried the like talking to myself while I'm looking in the mirror, which is really hard to do.
Yes,
like,
it is.
You feel kind of.
I still can't do it.
Yeah, no, right? Sometimes I have you do it. I feel silly. I feel like, I don't know, but I would never feel this way if I was talking to someone else and telling them how great they were. But it is hard to do it for yourself, especially if you have not been doing that, if that's not your thought process or how you've been raised or socialized. I feel like, especially for girls, right? Because we're being stuck up if we talk about these things. We're supposed to be, humble and all of this. So now I'm realizing through more and more through just reading, social media and posts from different people, therapists and all that it's also self-love is also giving yourself a break.
Absolutely.
Sleeping is where before I don't sleep till I'm dead. You would hear those kind of
I used
things,
to say that.
right? And now it's like, no, give your body rest. That's going to help in every way. It's going to help your mind. It's going to help your heart. It's going to help you improve. Saying no is self-love. Like before, I thought I had to say yes. I had to be available for everybody and everything.
Yeah.
And I do still take pride in that, but it's slowly killing me, and I can feel it. Because then when it comes time to doing things for myself, I don't have the energy. I don't want to. I don't have that same desire that I do for other people. But I'm trying to work on that more. I'm saying no more. I'm trying to be comfortable in loving myself, because I was also worried about being narcissistic, which we didn't talk about earlier, right? But people would throw that word around.
Yeah,
narcissism, especially when Kim Kardashian came out and she's taking pictures of herself and video, and it's like, oh, she's narcissistic. Like, it's like, okay, if you love yourself, you're narcissistic. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I didn't want to be labeled as that, right? But also all of that kind of played into everything. But I realized that first of all, you've got to block out what other people say and think and feel. It's going to be really hard to love yourself if you constantly let everyone else's opinions of everything penetrate you.
Yeah.
You can take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen. There's some valid points that people have, but mostly you need to be listening to your inner self. I think that's self-love, not being afraid to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
To evaluate yourself.
Yeah. I wanted to say something about that in terms of the difference between self-esteem and self-love. One of the turning points for me was many years ago. I worked at the Defense Information Systems Agency, or we call it DISA. It's part of the Department of Defense. And I had a really good friend of mine who was one of my partners in some of the work that I used to do. I'm not going to say his name because, I want to respect his privacy, but anyone who was at the agency at the time knows who he was. And he was an extremely high functioning person. I mean, just one of the smartest people that I ever knew. Also one of the most motivated people and he could just do so many things. And so, leadership would just assign him to just do everything because they knew that if they assigned it to him, that the work was going to get done. And he had great self-esteem in terms of his abilities to do anything. I mean, this is a guy who actually physically built his own home. I mean, he was just one of those kinds of people. He didn't own a TV. He was always working, always moving. But he ended up over time with some physical ailments that really affected his ability to do all the things that he really desired to do. And I saw at the point where folks at the agency were still pushing him to do more, and he wouldn't turn anything down, no matter how much pain he was in, no matter how difficult it was. He wouldn't turn it down because a lot of his self-worth had to do with his ability to do so many things. And it got to a point where he had to basically sit down a lot and lay down a lot because physically, he just couldn't do all the things that he wanted to do. And he sunk into a depression. And unfortunately, myself and others, we saw where his mood and everything was changing, but we didn't realize the depths that he had sunk. And he wasn't the type of person to say anything. He was a very prideful man. And so he wasn't willing to say, hey, I'm not doing okay. He would just try to suck it up and get through it. And one day he was sitting with his wife and basically said, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. And he went out in the backyard, pulled out a gun, and shot himself in the head.
Oh.
When that happened, that was just one of the hardest things for me, because it made me just really rethink everything I was doing, because I did have that mentality, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Because not only was I working at the time, we were running litters, we had Akitas, and we were breeding Akitas, and then with the kids, and just constantly on the move. And when he died, it made me rethink everything. And it's like, what are we even doing? Because he had all of this self-esteem, but no self-love. He was another one of those guys that had negative self-talk, who would, oh, come on, why are you doing this? And I've come close to saying his name, but I'm trying not to.
Right. Yeah.
But he would just beat himself up whenever he made the slightest mistake. And that's one of the things that I had always done. And I still do, unfortunately. And that's why I never was worried about other people's criticism, because my own criticism of myself was a whole lot worse than anyone else could throw on me. And I knew myself better. So it's like, I know my screw ups more than you do. So, save your criticisms. I've got plenty of my own.
And I'm not to interrupt you, but I want to interject there. Sometimes I think people do criticize themselves so that they can beat other people to the punch. Like, yes. I already know what you're going to say, so let me say it first. Let me, acknowledge that I realize I'm lacking in these areas.
I did plenty of that.
I did too. Yeah.
And that is one of the things. So self-talk is one of those things that I still haven't figured out. I've been working on it. But I tell you, to this day, I'll do something and it's like, oh, what are you doing? Why would you be so stupid? Why are you, and I would just start going in on myself. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times the mistakes were trivial. They weren't anything big, it would be something really simple, but I would just go in. And I've been working on finding the ability to improve my self-talk. Mm-hmm. How have you improved yours? Or have you?
I think I have. I mean, in certain areas, I don't beat myself up about how I look. And it may appear to you like I still do that because you're always complimenting how I look. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I'm looking like buckwheat right now. But not that there's anything wrong with buckwheat. But
buckwheat wish he looked like you.
But I don't sit there and just think about how I don't have, a Coca-Cola bottle shape that I want and all hips. And every once in a while it still comes into my mind. But it's not like how it was before. I mean, it was like kind of an obsession that I would constantly be looking at other people and wanting that look, to the point of considering surgery to get those things. And I don't have that anymore. I'm way more comfortable. Even though I'm not comfortable 100% in the body that I have, like I want, I realize that I need improvements. But before, even when I was as fit as I don't know what, I still was like, this isn't even enough. And when I look back at those pictures too, there's spaces and places where I'm like, oh, that's the body right there, when I start to put on a little weight. But when I was at the smallest, which was my goal to get small, I was like, oh, like when I look at that to this day, I'm just like, oh my gosh. But the fact that I chased it so hard, that I went after it financially and physically and mentally and every thing that I did was surrounded around that. And then I still didn't have that self-love talk, or self-love with relationships. It didn't. So people, that's not going to be it. Lose the weight, for health reasons. But if you think that's going to change how you feel inside, it's not. I mean, there's plenty of very fit, attractive people walking around without self-love and self-esteem. So let's get over that stereotype.
And I really think that we need to, and maybe I'm not going to make any sense here, but I think we need to get rid of the self-esteem thing. Anything that's based on achievements. I mean, you see people all the time. I know a friend of mine who owned businesses and he makes a lot of money and all of that. And he has self-esteem because he knows he can do all of these things. He has the ability to generate income, but he doesn't have the self-love. And he's even talked about it to me in private, which is why I'm not saying his name. But but in saying, I thought that when I got to here, I was going to feel so much better about myself.
Right.
And I did. And I didn't feel any better about myself. And so it's one of those things that if I could talk to my younger self, it's probably stop worrying so much about self-esteem and really start to love yourself. And maybe things get a whole lot better. You had talked about how you in relationships, you were chasing after love. I was kind of the opposite, whereas I didn't understand why a woman was with me. I was like, what are you doing with me? It doesn't even make sense, And so now I'm wondering, hey, what's wrong with you? Why are you with me? And it's crazy, but flash forward, I have gotten a lot better with my self-talk in terms of things that I do, in terms of giving myself grace and loving myself more. The next hurdle for me, which I still am trying to clear, is for the people in my life that I love and care about, in terms of, for you, for instance, for my children, for my parents, for my sisters, and my close friends. If I feel like I disappoint them, it unleashes the old self-talk where I really just hammer myself because of I've let down someone that I really care about. I mean, other people in the world, I don't really care. It really doesn't bother me at all. But the people that I love and respect and care for, when I let them down, it almost gives me license to just start it back up again, start up that self-hate train and just take it on down the tracks. And once I do, it's hard to get out of it. And so once I feel like I can clear that hurdle, I think that I'm well on my way to really loving myself a lot better and doing it consistently.
Yeah. I think something you just said made me think about when someone that I love and care about is upset or maybe disappointed in me, you and, my mom, and I internalize that as me not being likable. I'm worried about that likability is fading. This is the beginning of it. Now they see who I really am.
Yeah.
And it's going to just keep snowballing. It's going to get worse. And that kind of happened a little bit last night.
Yes.
With us. And I started to think about, Freddie wanted me to go, I told him that I want to, hold me accountable for working out. And like the past 2 or 3 days, I kept saying, I'm going to, and I didn't. And he was a little harsher on me than I probably could handle. It was good, but he still, and then my mind went all over the place. It went all over the place, but it was like, now I'm not the person that he thinks so highly of. It's coming out. And here's the beginning of him feeling some type of way. Instead of me just like, I do love myself and I should work out and I'm going to for that reason and that reason alone. I asked him to push me on this and he did, and not to attach it to 5 million thoughts, just keeping it centered on me. What will that working out do for my body and my mind? And that if I kept the focus on that, on my self-love, then it won't allow me to like deflect and push it everywhere else. And I actually did go work out. It was like 9:00 at night and I did it. So, but it wasn't before going through a process of like, falling into that little lack of self-love thing. But I caught myself. So that's the difference between now and being younger. When I didn't even know what self-love was, I didn't even know I was supposed to love myself, you know? I had no idea. Now I know how important it is, and I'm getting more and more comfortable with it. And I don't do it in every area, and I have a long way to go, but it is something that I'm cognizant of, and I see it as something that I'm going to achieve, you know, as my journey continues.
Yeah, and I think that we're not alone in this struggle. A lot of people are dealing with this, and I feel like everyone pushing themselves and, you know, pushing each other as a community. Like, for instance, the other day I was criticizing myself because I do it out loud sometimes. And Tiffany is yelling at me from the other room, stop that, you know, and holding each other accountable for these things, I think is really going to be important. And I think not just in terms of the two of us, but also in terms of our friends and family, everyone just kind of holding each other accountable for giving ourselves more grace, for caring more about ourselves, for loving ourselves so much. Well, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I moved out here from Maryland, because I felt like I needed a pattern interrupt where I just went somewhere else where I could just start to enjoy life more and not work like crazy and attach my self-worth to how much I worked and to how much I could do and all that kind of stuff. And finding ways to just love myself. It's not something that I've gotten to yet, but I'm getting there.
I one piece of advice I'd like to give to the listeners is that how can we help this society have more self-love? Because I think we kind of lack that as a society, which is why we see so many people who, I mean, right, there's always a lot of variables that go into who we are. But I think self-love is one of the big ones that we don't give enough credit to. And we see lots of people joining gangs or, becoming drug addicts or just becoming addicted to a lifestyle that does not help them be better, getting involved in the wrong relationships or staying in jobs that are...
Or extremely fanatical sports fans.
Yes. Yes.
I got to throw that out there.
But if I think about what maybe a child needs to hear and experience in order to help develop that self-love muscle is, this makes me think of a friend of mine named Nicole. I'm going to say her name. I haven't talked to Nicole in a while, but we're Facebook friends. So if she ever, hears this, great. One day her daughter was asking her, and her daughter was young at the time, I don't know, in the single digit age group. And she asked her about a painting or a picture. She's like, Mommy, what do you think of this? And instead of her mom like saying, oh, it's so cute. Oh my God, you did the best job, whatever, trying to pump up her self-esteem.
Right.
She said to her, well, what do you think of it? And that, her child went on to talk about how she felt about it and blah, 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 blah. And like, I think pointing out that that's more important, not saying her mom couldn't afterwards tell her, but it's so important. What do you think of what you just did?
Yes.
Right? Because a lot of times the kids are so proud when they're walking over to you and they see your reaction and then, they internalize your reaction as being the truth. If your reaction is like, oh, nice, right? And they internalize that. So it's really important to ask them, what do they think about themselves?
And the reason why that's important is because some parents get overly positive and shower so much onto the child that the kid is like, okay, my parents don't know what they're talking about. It gets to the point where it's like unbelievable. And so, yeah, to turn it around and ask them and to interrogate their thought process, I think that does bode well.
Yes, and because also that all of that showering them with this was great, this is the best. You're trying to build their self-esteem, but at the same time, you're giving them a false sense, So usually when you ask them what they think of something they did, they will be able to give you an honest answer for themselves. And I think that's really important to be able to do that,
Yeah.
and to do that more, evaluate yourself based on, because when you're little, you're just, especially when you're under 5, you don't have all the peer pressure yet, right? That's the perfect time to build all of that self-esteem and self-talk, like to get them started early on the self-talk. And if they do have high self-esteem, just make sure it's true self-esteem, right? And not rooted in what society thinks they should be doing or just achievements, because at the end of the day, those things, they come and go, right? But how you feel about yourself is the most important.
Yeah. And as we wrap up this episode, and we will talk about it more in the future because of the way we were as children and as adults, we have plenty to talk about when it comes down to lack of self-esteem or lack of self-love, but we are working towards it. But these are conversations that you should have with your friends and family and figure out how to hold each other accountable to improving self-talk and improving self-love.
Yep, I agree. So thank you for listening. As always, we appreciate it. Don't forget to hit those likes and subscribe and follow buttons and share. We really appreciate you listening to our podcast. Do not forget to please leave us comments, questions, things you'd like to hear, anything about what we talked about today. It's much appreciated. We do listen and we do try to include that into our podcast. We thank you so much for listening today, and I'm out. Tiffany.
It's Freddy, and I'm out. You take care. Thank you for your time.